6 engines, 32 wheels, a wingspan wider than a football field. On December 21, 1988, the largest airplane ever constructed lifts off from a factory airfield on the outskirts of Kyiv. It weighs more than 600,000 kilograms fully loaded, heavier than a jumbo jet, heavier than a military transport, heavier than anything that has ever left the ground under its own power. The Soviet Union has just built a machine so enormous that no other nation on Earth can match it, and it was created for one single audacious purpose: to carry a space shuttle on its back. This is Blueprint. This is the story of the Antonov An-225 Mriya, a word that means dream in Ukrainian. It is the story of Cold War paranoia and engineering genius, of a machine born from superpower rivalry that outlived the empire that built it, only to be destroyed by the very forces of Russian aggression it was never designed to survive. The story begins not in a hangar or a design bureau, but in orbit. In April 1981, the American space shuttle Columbia launches from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and a new era of spaceflight begins. Across the Iron Curtain, Soviet military analysts watch with deep suspicion. The shuttle's enormous cargo bay, pushed for by the Pentagon, can haul military satellites into orbit. The Kremlin sees not a triumph of science, but a strategic weapon. They want one of their own. The result is the Buran program. Buran, Russian for blizzard, becomes the Soviet Union's answer to the American shuttle. Visually, it is strikingly similar. The same delta wings, the same black and white heat tiles, the same silhouette against the sky. Whether this is imitation or convergent engineering remains debated to this day, but the ambitions go even further than copying NASA. Soviet planners envisioned the An-225 not only as a shuttle carrier, but eventually as a flying launch platform, part of a program called MAX, the multi-purpose aerospace system, which would use the giant aircraft to launch smaller spaceplanes directly into orbit from altitude. The An-225 is not just a transport. In the Soviet imagination, it is the first stage of a reusable space program. But before any of that can happen, the Buran comes with a logistical nightmare that the Americans never quite had to face. The Soviet Union is vast. Manufacturing facilities sit around Moscow. The launch site, the Baikonur Cosmodrome, lies over 1,300 miles away in the sun-scorched steppe of Kazakhstan. There are no highways wide enough, no rivers that run in the right direction, no rail lines that can handle the load. The only option is the sky. NASA solved this problem simply enough. They strapped the space shuttle to the back of a modified Boeing 747 and flew it cross-country. The Soviets need something similar, but there is no aircraft in their inventory, or anyone else's, large enough to do the job. First, they try helicopters. The brand new Mi-26, the most powerful helicopter in the world, seems promising. Engineers attempt test flights using 2, 3, even 4 helicopters flying in formation, lifting a mock-up of the Buran between them. During one test, turbulence strikes and the suspended cargo begins to swing like a pendulum beneath the straining rotors. The pilots dump their load in a controlled panic. The helicopter option is dead. Next comes a stopgap measure. The Soviets take an aging Myasishchev M4 strategic bomber, a relic of the 1950s nuclear arms race, and reinforce it, add a twin tail, strap external fittings to its fuselage, and rebrand it the VMT Atlant. 2 of these converted bombers enter service and manage around 150 flights, hauling disassembled Buran components and Energia rocket parts to Baikonur. But the flights are dangerous. Reports leak out of fuel leaks, runway excursions, structural anxieties about what happens if the pressure inside the rocket tank shifts during flight. The VMT is a patch, not a solution. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, at the Antonov Design Bureau, something extraordinary is already taking shape. The bureau already has a formidable heavy lifter in its lineup, the An-124 Ruslan, a 4-engine transport aircraft bigger than the Boeing 747-400. Lead designer Viktor Tolmachev is tasked with taking the An-124's proven airframe and scaling it up to something the world has never seen. The goal is not incremental improvement. The goal is to double the cargo capacity. The design team at Antonov works with extraordinary speed. In roughly 3.5 years, they stretched the An-124's fuselage, adding barrel extensions fore and aft of the wings to create a cargo hold 43 meters long, 6.5 meters wide, and 4.5 meters high, spacious enough, by some calculations, to fit 50 cars inside. They widen the wings and add root extensions, increasing the wingspan to 88.4 meters, nearly 300 feet, wider than the length of a football pitch. They bolt on 2 additional engines, bringing the total to 6 Ivchenko Progress D18T turbofans, each one producing over 51,000 pounds of thrust. They redesigned the landing gear into a 32-wheel system, 2 nose bogies and 14 main wheel bogies, 7 on each side, 20 of the wheels steerable. The aircraft needs to distribute its extraordinary mass across any runway surface it might encounter. And then there is the tail. The original An-124 has a single vertical stabilizer, but the An-225 needs to carry the Buran externally, mounted on top of the fuselage. A single tail fin would be swallowed by the aerodynamic wake of a space shuttle riding piggyback. So Tomachev gives the An-225 twin vertical stabilizers, a distinctive, almost whale-like tail configuration that solves 2 problems at once. The split tails provide enough rudder authority to counteract the enormous drag and turbulence created by an orbiter strapped to the aircraft's spine, and they allow the An-225 to fit inside existing Soviet hangars, whose doors cannot accommodate a single massive fin. The numbers that define this aircraft strain credulity. Empty, the An-225 weighs approximately 250,000 kilograms. Its maximum takeoff weight reaches 600,000 kilograms, later upgraded to 640,000, 1.4 million pounds. It can carry 250,000 kilograms of cargo internally or 200,000 kilograms on its back. With a full fuel load and no cargo, it can fly over 15,000 kilometers. With maximum payload, it can still cover 4,500 kilometers. Everything about it is the superlative form, the heaviest, the longest, the widest wingspan of any operational aircraft in history. On December 21st, 1988, pilot Alexander Kholonenko lifts the An-225 off the runway at the Sviatoshin factory airfield in Kyiv for the first time. The maiden flight is a success. The aircraft handles well, enormous, yes, but stable, responsive for its size. The Soviet aviation industry has just produced something unprecedented. 5 months later, on May 13th, 1989, comes the moment the entire program has been building toward. The An-225 takes off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome with the Buran space shuttle mounted on its back. The combined weight at takeoff is staggering. The flight lasts over 2 hours, and every minute of it is data. Aerodynamic performance under the most extreme loading conditions any aircraft has ever endured in flight. The tests confirm what the engineers hoped. The An-225 can carry the shuttle. Then comes the debut that shocks the world. On June 5th, 1989, the An-225 arrives at the Paris Air Show at Le Bourget, with Buran riding on its fuselage. The combined weight at takeoff for this flight registers at approximately 560,000 kilograms, the greatest weight ever lifted by an aircraft. Western aviation experts, military analysts, and ordinary spectators stand in stunned silence. The Cold War is still technically in progress, and the Soviet Union has just landed the most impressive piece of aviation engineering anyone has ever seen at the world's most prestigious air show, with a space shuttle strapped to its back. The following year, at the 1990 Farnborough Air Show in England, the An-225 performs a flying display for the public, cementing its status as the most spectacular aircraft on the planet. Aviation journalists exhaust their superlatives. Engineers from Boeing and Lockheed study it with a mixture of professional admiration and quiet disbelief. For a brief, shining moment, the An-225 represents the pinnacle of what centralized state engineering can achieve when resources are unlimited and the objective is singular. But history is about to make a cruel turn. The An-225 and the Buran first fly in late 1988, 1 year before the fall of the Berlin Wall. By the time the An-225 is being demonstrated at air shows, the Soviet Union is already fracturing. The Buran program, which justified the An-225's very existence, completes just one uncrewed orbital flight in November 1988. It is a technical success, and in some ways, a more impressive one than anything NASA achieved with its shuttle. Buran launches atop an Energia rocket, orbits the Earth twice, and lands autonomously on a runway at Baikonur without a single cosmonaut aboard, guided entirely by onboard computers. The American shuttle never attempted a fully autonomous landing. It is a triumph of Soviet engineering achieved at the precise moment the Soviet system can no longer sustain itself. The money is running out. The empire is coming apart. In 1991, the Soviet Union dissolves. The Buran program is formally cancelled in 1993. The An-225, suddenly without a mission, is grounded. It sits on the tarmac at Hostomel airport just outside Kyiv as Ukraine inherits the aircraft along with the Antonov Design Bureau. For nearly a decade, the largest airplane ever built simply sits there, exposed to the elements. Parts are cannibalized. The dream, it seems, is over. But dreams, by their nature, resist endings. By the late 1990s, the global economy is booming, and with it comes an insatiable appetite for transporting things that were never meant to fly. Power plant generators, diesel locomotive engines, wind turbine blades, oil and gas equipment that weighs as much as a house. The world's cargo fleet can handle almost anything, but there exists a category of freight so large, so heavy, so awkwardly shaped that only one aircraft on Earth can move it. And that aircraft is gathering dust in Ukraine. In 2000, the decision is made to bring the An-225 back to life. Antonov Airlines invests over $20 million in refurbishing and modernizing the aircraft. New avionics, new safety systems, new navigation and communication equipment, a reinforced cargo floor to handle heavier commercial payloads. The maximum takeoff weight climbs to 640,000 kilograms. On May 7, 2001, the An-225 takes to the skies again. Antonov Airlines begins offering the aircraft for charter missions, the ultimate option when no other plane on Earth can do the job. What follows is a second life, more remarkable than the first. The An-225 becomes a global celebrity, a folk hero of aviation. Plane spotters track its movements obsessively. Flight tracking websites crash when Mriya takes off. Whenever it visits an airport, Perth, Manchester, Leipzig, Tianjin, crowds gather spontaneously. People line roads and observation decks and nearby hillsides to watch something that, by all ordinary logic, should not be able to fly. It seems to hang in the air, sailing impossibly slowly for its size, as though the laws of physics have made a temporary exception, and the records accumulate. On August 11, 2009, the An-225 lifts the heaviest single cargo item ever sent by air, a power plant generator, along with its loading frame, weighing 189,980 kilograms. In June 2010, it carries the longest pieces of air cargo ever flown, 2 wind turbine blades, each 42.1 meters long, from Tianjin, China to Denmark. Over its career, the aircraft accumulates more than 240 world records. It carries complete diesel locomotives. It hauls 232 tons of oil and gas equipment in a single flight. Anything that seems physically impossible to move by air, the An-225 moves. Then comes 2020 and a pandemic that reshapes the world. As COVID-19 sweeps across continents and overwhelms medical systems, the An-225 is pressed into a role no one in the 1980s could have imagined for a Soviet space shuttle carrier. On April 14, 2020, fresh from an 18-month overhaul, the An-225 departs Tianjin, China, packed with approximately 100 tons of medical supplies, millions of face masks, COVID-19 test kits, protective suits, visors, medicines. The total volume approaches 1,000 cubic meters, filling 4/5 of the aircraft's enormous hold. It is the largest volume of cargo ever transported inside an aircraft in the history of aviation. The flight lands in Warsaw, Poland, and the aircraft becomes a symbol of something far beyond engineering, a symbol of global cooperation in crisis, a Cold War weapon repurposed into an instrument of humanitarian mercy. Less than a week later, Mriya breaks its own record again, delivering 150 metric tons of medical cargo from China to France. Workers at Paris Vatry Airport need 10 hours to unload everything. For a machine designed to carry a space shuttle across the Soviet Union, this is perhaps the most poetic second act imaginable. But there is no third act, only an ending. By January 2022, the An-225 is based at Hostomel Airport, Antonov Airport, on the outskirts of Kyiv. It has just completed what will prove to be its final commercial mission, collecting almost 90 tons of COVID-19 test kits from Tianjin, China, and delivering them to Billund, Denmark. The aircraft returns to its home base on February 5th, where it enters the hangar for an engine swap. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine have been escalating for months. Intelligence is flowing. NATO representatives approach Antonov's leadership with a proposal: relocate the aircraft fleet, including Mriya, to Leipzig, Germany. The CIA has obtained detailed Russian attack plans. CIA Director William Burns has personally traveled to Ukraine and informed its leadership that Russia intends to seize Antonov Airport as an airbridge, a launch pad for paratroopers to flood into Kyiv and topple the government. The An-225 is in flyable condition. It could leave. An evacuation is reportedly scheduled for the morning of February 24th, but the order to fly is never given. The reasons remain bitterly contested. Later, Ukrainian prosecutors will charge former Antonov head Sergei Bychkov with official negligence for failing to authorize the evacuation. The pilot of the An-225, Major Dmytro Antonov, will publicly accuse company management of ignoring NATO's warnings. The company denies the allegations. On the morning of February 24th, 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. Hostomel Airport is among the very first targets. Between 20 and 34 Russian military helicopters, Mil-Mi-8 transports, escorted by Ka-52 attack helicopters, sweep south from the Belarusian border. They carry approximately 300 airborne troops from the 31st Guards Air Assault Brigade. Their objective is to seize the airport and establish an air bridge less than 10 kilometers from the heart of Kyiv. Ukrainian forces respond with fierce resistance. The 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade of the National Guard, including the Omega Special Forces Group, engages the Russian paratroopers. Ukrainian man-portable air defense systems and ground fire bring down multiple helicopters. By evening, Ukrainian counterattacks from the 81st and 95th Air Assault Brigades, the 72nd Mechanized Brigade, and Special Forces units encircle the isolated Russian troops. Artillery barrages and airstrikes crater the runway, denying Russia the air bridge it desperately needs. But on February 25th, Russian armored reinforcements pushing south from Belarus break through Ukrainian defenses and recapture the airport. The runway is wrecked. The strategic objective, an air bridge for Ilyushin 1L-76 transports to pour heavy equipment into Kyiv, has failed. But the damage is done. On the morning of February 27th, 2022, an artillery shell pierces the roof of a hangar within the airport's perimeter. It strikes the aircraft parked beneath. A fire erupts. A Ukrainian surveillance drone captures the aftermath from above. The footage, soon posted on social media, confirms what millions around the world have feared. The Antonov An-225 Mriya, the dream, is burning. Drone footage from April 1st shows the full extent of the destruction. The forward fuselage is completely incinerated. The wings, partly intact, sag toward the ground. The right wing broken, but held aloft only by its engines resting on the tarmac. A Hungarian-registered Cessna 152, parked in the same hangar, has been crushed beneath the falling wingtip. The largest airplane ever built has been reduced to wreckage. By April 2nd, 2022, Ukraine reclaims control of the airport, following Russia's withdrawal from the entire Kyiv region, a withdrawal forced by the very resistance that began at this airfield on the first morning of the war. The airport that Russia tried to seize as a gateway to the capital has instead become a graveyard. The destruction of the An-225 reverberates far beyond aviation. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba captures the sentiment felt across the country and around the world. Russia has destroyed Ukraine's Mriya, but it cannot destroy the dream of a free and democratic European state. On May 20th, 2022, President Volodymyr Zelensky announces Ukraine's intention to complete the second An-225, the partially built airframe that has sat unfinished since the 1980s, brought to roughly 60 to 70% completion before funding dried up. In November 2022, Antonov confirms plans to rebuild, estimating the cost at $500 million. By early 2023, parts are being salvaged from the wreckage of the original aircraft for potential mating with the unfinished fuselage. Whether a new An-225 will ever fly remains deeply uncertain. The original D-180 engines have not been produced in decades. The avionics are obsolete. Many components were manufactured across the former Soviet Union, including in Russia, a supply chain now permanently severed. Estimates for a full reconstruction range from $500 million to $3 billion. The engineering challenges are immense. The political will is strong, but will is not funding. And yet, the story of the An-225 has always been a story about the improbable. It was improbable that a design bureau in Soviet Ukraine could build the largest aircraft in history in 3.5 years. It was improbable that a machine built for the Cold War's most ambitious space program would find a second life hauling generators and wind turbine blades across the globe. It was improbable that a shuttle carrier would become a pandemic relief aircraft, delivering millions of masks to a world in crisis. Every chapter of its existence defied expectation. The An-225 set more than 240 world records. It carried loads that no other machine in human history could lift. It flew for over 30 years across two distinct lifetimes, first as a tool of superpower competition, then as a workhorse of global commerce. It was conceived in secrecy, unveiled in spectacle, mothballed in neglect, reborn in capitalism, and destroyed in war. It was, from beginning to end, a machine that embodied the contradictions of the century that created it. There is something worth sitting with in the fact that the Soviet Union, a system not known for dreaming, at least not in the way its citizens were permitted to dream, produced an aircraft literally named Dream. A system built on centralized control and collective sacrifice created something so individually magnificent, so singularly extraordinary, that the entire world stopped to watch it fly. The Mriya was not a fleet. It was not a production line. It was one aircraft, one of a kind, irreplaceable. In a system that valued the mass over the individual, it was the most individual machine ever built. And perhaps that is why its loss stings so deeply. Not just for Ukraine, not just for aviation enthusiasts, but for anyone who has ever watched something impossibly large and impossibly graceful rise into the air and thought, we built that. Humans built that. The hangar at Hostomel stands empty now. The runway has been repaired. Somewhere in that complex, an unfinished fuselage waits, 60 to 70% complete. A skeleton of ambition suspended between two eras. Will it ever fly? Will the dream be reborn a third time? No one can say. But the An-225 has always been defined by a single stubborn quality: the refusal to accept that something is impossible simply because no one has done it before. A space shuttle needed to cross 1,300 miles of step, and so someone built the largest airplane in the world. A pandemic needed millions of masks moved across continents, and so a Cold War relic became a lifeline. A nation needed a symbol that its spirit could not be broken, and so a burning aircraft became something more powerful than any machine. It became a promise. The dream was destroyed. The question is whether the dreaming has stopped.